Don't everybody talk at once.
I don't think my sound was working for a second. I still have video. Let me check this. Or maybe I just don't see video. There we go. Oh! Well, it's three of the best looking guys that are part of this call.
Oh no, I would say I'm definitely the best looking. Just take a look there.
Yeah, but Alistair, that's not a high bar.
Three.
Yeah, that's not a high bar here.
I'm in the top three best looking people on this call right now.
I do have my VR Council t-shirt on in honor of our being virtual and it being clean.
So we're going to have to ask Cecilia to edit out the beginning of the recording here.
Is Celia not joining us?
I think she is. I noticed. I'm not sure if you saw in Slack. Chad said he might be a few minutes late. I have not yet. I've been, like many of us, back to back stuff. So I will pull up the agenda. And I know we had a popcorn question that it seemed good. So let me pull that agenda up and I can contribute more. I'm gonna mute myself for a second.
I've got a lot of people sending regrets. Probably at least 4 people who are hopping on these calls who now have a standing meeting at 2 p.m. Central Time. So Zoom has become way too, and et cetera, become way too popular maybe. But there's always a recording, and we've had a whopping 5 responses to the survey, which is actually about what I'd expect. So that's including Pava. Thank you, Pava.
You're welcome. How are you?
Well, Alistair just lost his place at the top of our list, but you probably don't want to know about. That I'm sort of anchoring the ugly end of the scale, and Alistair was asserting he was so handsome that he can't turn his video on because it would just dazzle us too much. But mostly we're just, tap dancing until we get more people to show up. Thank you for filling out the survey, Pava, and glad to have you.
Yeah, happy to hop on. Really excited to see what it's like.
The real reason, this is Alistair, my picture's not there. I recently moved apartments, and as of now, I can't find my webcam. It's in one of the what looks like hundreds of boxes that I'm surrounded by.
Oh, you'll find it eventually. When you need it the least, probably.
Well, in 3 or 4 years, you'll find all the boxes open.
In 3 or 4 years, wow! I still have boxes. I've lived here for almost 5, so it's bad.
You still have boxes, Celia?
Well, yes, I have a box, and then my son shipped back everything that he was living with in Korea, because now he lives out of a 26-pound backpack. Oh. And he's done that for 8 months now. Is live out of 26 pounds.
Must be very strong at this point.
Yeah.
Does he send the laundry home?
No, thank goodness, because he's in New Zealand, so it's really hard to send laundry home.
I just put I put a YouTube video. If you haven't seen it, actor John Krasinski and his family have started a YouTube channel called Some Good News, and there's a lot of silliness, but the second one was just, well, you need to watch at least the second half of it. It's pretty mind-blowing. So I was yelling about all the dust in the room because it couldn't possibly be that I was teared up. But
aww, that's sweet, Norris.
I tear up very easily for some reason, and added to my allergies, it's like I invest a lot in hankies.
Yes, and it's hard to get tissues these days. So Eric pulled up the agenda.
Yes,
Very good.
and I will, let's see, I'll be glad to share that. I'll just share that in just a second. I want to do 2 more minutes of work on that thing
Oh,
Okay.
okay.
before it's fully ready to share.
So I know we have a check-in question, but I'm curious, since Norris kind of brought it up and opened himself up to being vulnerable. What makes you emotional? So right now there's a lot of emotion going around, and in varying degrees of happiness and despair and all of those things. So can you share in the last week or so what made you emotional? Norris, and your YouTube thing.
I guess, so hi guys, I'm Pava. I'm relatively new here. And my background is working really hands-on with a lot of startups and small businesses. And hearing from all of the small businesses that I've worked with about how much they've been suffering has been like absolutely devastating. Like I'll still tear up talking about it now, because it's people that we've worked and we've helped build an ecosystem around, and they've done so well to just watch all of that come crumbling down for something they can't control. So that's definitely been something that's like done the emotional roller coaster over the past few weeks.
Great. And Pava, since you're new, I'll share with you that we usually popcorn a question so that you can call on somebody and then they can answer. So pick
Okay,
somebody.
cool. Eliza?
Hey, good to be back. I'm Eliza. I work at Forward Cities. I also work with Eric, and I am hopping back onto these calls after a few months hiatus. And something that made me emotional this past week was I learned that my dad, who's been deployed for the 3rd time since December, will be coming back due to the coronavirus. So that made me relieved because my mom will be alone in the suburbs. So a strangely positive thing. And I'll popcorn over to Norris.
Well, my favorite one was seeing this video, and it you can sort of tell what they're setting up to do, but it was quite powerful. I prefer to focus on positive emotions. I think that, and it's turned out to be easier than I thought, and that just have to make a commitment to see the good, to see the the positives, and there's enough negative out there. So I'm going to toss it to Professor Meeks, who's doing his shameless self-promotion in his background there. Mike, what got you fired up?
Hey, Norris, thanks. Yeah, I'm going to go the other direction. Nothing at all. Everything in my world's perfect. All the technology is working great. Things are more efficient now. And all I hear from all the meetings I go to are about all the problems. All my entrepreneurs are doing great. They've education's in a panic now because we're doing everything online. But all my online stuff is great. So I have no complaints at all.
Yay. Popcorn too.
Oh, who hasn't? I just had a webcam problem. So,
So
Elisa, how
not
about you?
everything is going great.
I will jump in. Let's see. This is Eric. I get to work with Eliza. That's fantastic. Let's see. And I'm in New Mexico. And what I'll say is, I think we need to restate the question in the chat. But the thing that's got me sort of fired up is I'm seeing on a day-to-day basis how those communities that have an effective sort of council or organization that brings people together and really unifies the action in a strategic way, I see how they're really delivering for the folks there. The double-edged sword of that is that folks who are not already connected to that structure Often, Black and brown founders, other communities that you would expect to be left out are in fact left out. So it just highlights the real essential nature of our ecosystem building work. I will popcorn to Beth.
Thanks, Eric. Hey, everybody, it's Beth from Erie, Pennsylvania. And Eric, you actually were right talking about exactly what I was thinking about. I just got off of a Zoom meeting with 41 people from our ecosystem, and about 17 of them were tagged as advisors on all of these things going on around the COVID-19 response to small businesses. And I was so frustrated that we don't have that one place where they're convening and everybody knows that you go to this source and you're not going to get conflicting answers to your questions. And if we don't know the answer, we're going to tell you that. So that's what's making me emotional today. But in the last week, on the flip side, seeing these communities and neighborhoods cheering their first responders and their healthcare workers on as they come and go from work is just fantastic. And I hope that continues. And I can't popcorn to Celia since I can't see anyone else. And I love you, Celia.
Oh, thank you. I love you too, Beth. I'm grateful for all of you who keep me inspired all the time. And then once in a while, I will go look on my cousin's Instagram because I need some kind of fix of something that makes me smile. So this is social distancing. I don't know if you can see. These are 3-year-olds social distancing and in their superhero outfits. So that makes me smile. That's my my cousin Chuck's kids. So they're outside. They're really cute and that's uplifting. So I keep remembering why we do this, why we do the things that we do. It's because we want to build a better future for people like that. So Alistair, popcorn to you.
Okay. I'll try to be positive also. I think when this is all over, a lot of businesses may be rethinking their business models, and that can be productive. I was talking with this is not a good scientific piece of evidence, but anecdotally talking with my son who works for a video game developer, and they're all working from home now. And they're all working from home now, and his boss mentioned their productivity has jumped. So if you can still hear me, that I think is something, could be a positive change, the rethinking of business models. I'll popcorn to Alexandra then, as she's on my screen.
Alexandra, just a check-in question as we were waiting for people to get on was, what's made you emotional in the last week or so, positive or challenging?
Wow, that's kind of many things actually, since everything is going on, a lot of things, a lot of news. We are home, so I think really basic things like that we do home kind of made me really emotional, that we spare some time more with our families. It kind of made me rethink some of the things we do in our everyday life, because now we're in quarantine all and stuck at home. So I don't know, maybe consider the time we spend, do we spend it wisely enough, I would say. So, I don't know.
Alexandra, so are you in Skopje?
No, I'm actually at my parents' house in Ohrid. I'm in Macedonia though, in another town.
Ah, so, but you're still in Macedonia.
Yeah, true.
It's got to be crazy over there.
Yeah, they kind of imposed from Wednesday total lockdown, so only 2 hours a day, something like that. But those who go to work can have more. Academia doesn't go to work, so we are stuck kind of home totally from Wednesday. So we'll see. And this is my little daughter probably, because this is 9 o'clock p.m. here. So the timing is perfect for me. Sorry for the noise.
No, I think that's great. I'm going to turn it over to Norris and Eric, who have worked hard on an agenda. So I will turn it over to you. Thanks for letting me popcorn in something just a little more light or not.
Eric, you want to give well, we have another sort of another icebreaker question, but why not? Eric, do you want to fire it off?
Sure thing. So yeah, we're all about the work. So yeah, and we refuse to be kind. So let's see. So there were a couple of things. So and we might do a little more sort of the shape of the day. One of the things we wanted to do was get people kind of focused on some of the different projects that we might be able to do in this time of crisis, but also to help prepare for when we are starting to emerge from that. And you know, there are going to be, you know, interesting sets of needs at that time too. So the first question that we had for folks was, and generally quick answers again, what resources did you find most useful this last week or so? And I'll put that in the chat as well. And just to start, I'll be boring and I'll say Zoom has been, you know, the thing that, you know, we love to hate or glad to have in our lives and whatever. So I'll say Zoom has been indispensable, and I'm not sure how I feel about that. I see that Michael Meeks has added, he said Zoom as well. Any expansion on that, Michael? Oh, this might be easy.
We should mute you.
Yeah, Mike, looks like you're still muted there.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yep.
It was amazing when the state finally said no movement, how many of our faculty don't know how to use a computer. It's amazing because we live in this world of entrepreneurship. So this morning, I've been on 3 Zooms. We are actually interviewing people where they're doing their job talks at our university via Zoom. So I think there's going to be a psychological shift now to the possibilities of how we conduct work in the future. And I think our entrepreneurs are going to be the ones that make that happen.
All right. Go ahead.
Popcorn?
We're going to be more directed for a second. So I'll actually go to Alexandra.
Okay, I'm here.
So the question is, what resources, and I'll throw these in the chat, there's got another one that I'll put in there in a second, but what resource or resources did you find most useful this past week or so?
I kindly discovered all the possible apps for doing some conference calling, because Zoom has experienced today, especially some technical difficulties. So I kind of discovered all the applications that there are for conferencing I didn't know about. For instance, today, GoToMeeting, I didn't use it till now. And especially I tried to kind of reconsider some usage for my students. I use a lot of Menti now. Mentimeter, you know, for my, nowadays. So I was using that less before, but now I kind of introduced it more, especially related to my students and the online teaching we do. So in kind of to make them engage in the process, maybe. And also a lot of Microsoft tools I didn't know about. They have these Teams. We didn't use that before. We have them, but we didn't use them, like Microsoft Teams. Also, you can have some conference calls and stuff. So that's it. Basically, communication was the main topic the last 10 days. Establishing communication.
That's awesome. Let's see. We've got and so we'll do the abbreviated version of popcorning or of these. So Alexandra also mentioned Google Hangouts. Alistair is a fan of plain old email. Love it. You know, it's somewhat reliable. I rarely use mail these days. So, and Eliza was sharing the Johns Hopkins COVID-19 active cases map. Very, very cool. Anyone want to expand on those or add something else?
I like the startup link, their innovation map. Have you guys all seen that? Where just to improve our level of optimism as the amount of innovation that's going on around the world to combat COVID-19. It's pretty cool.
Typing notes in and trying to mute and unmute effectively. One thing that I'll share, maybe I'll throw a link in there. There's a local visualization organization, RS21, and what they've done is they've looked at, I want to say it's about maybe a dozen to 20 cities right now. And in addition, they've basically taken census maps and some other ESRI data and are publishing where we're likely to see more, poor health outcomes. So, and then if you look at the different, the mapping of the different medical medical locations around city, it shows you where are we likely to see, hotspots for negative outcomes. So it's been a good time for those of us who are interested in data, I think, to see data being used in a very useful way. Anyone else want to add anything? Oh, Airtable, yeah.
Airtable is great. That University of Washington has a different sort of map that has sort of the flattened, kind of shows how much the curve is flattening or not. As long as Idaho looks better than Washington State, we're happy. We have a lot fewer people. We actually have one major hotspot, and it's Sun Valley, and all the rich people fled the coasts and brought us gifts. But it's these tools is finding the variety of tools is what impresses me. You can find the one that resonates with you, how you think, how you visualize, like to visualizing, that there is something for everybody out there. I think Pava, what's been your experience with Airtable?
So we do a lot of aggregating different resources for entrepreneurs. And one of the things that we did is we're making these interactive dashboards for different communities who want to let their entrepreneurs filter through resources instead of just having a list with a bunch of links. And so usually we have a whole fancy backend, but that makes it really hard for the client or for the ecosystems to onboard the data that they have. So we've been using Airtable for it instead. And we found that it's just super, super easy and intuitive for pretty much anyone to hop on and sort into categories. And it's also really cool because you can embed those views and add filters. So if you need a 5-minute interactive database of resources, you can just use Airtable without having to pay for it, which has been really, really invaluable for these quick responses in communities.
Eric, you want to go to the second question?
So our second question, and let's see, I'm not sure if the folks who are not on video, if they could see the chat or not. So of course we'll read these out. We try to do a pretty good job of going back to the chat and highlighting things that different people have posted. And this is really to the point of what this, what this group exists or this goal exists for. And the question is, how do we demonstrate our impact, the impact of ecosystem builders? Let's see. And the way that I posted it, it looks like Beth is an answer to that with Startup Link, but that's not necessarily true. It could be. But yeah, the question again, how do we demonstrate the impact of ecosystem builders, for our various clients? Who wants to take that one on? We're getting a little deeper now.
I'll hop on.
Go ahead.
So one of our ecosystem builders, Gabe, who's in Kansas City, is reaching out to entrepreneurs that he's worked with each day and just following up to see what their needs are, what their concerns are. And he's taking notes by filling out a form for each call. And we're hoping to synthesize that information and show what the primary concerns are of those that we've worked with and how Gabe is assisting in dealing with those concerns.
Well, to piggyback on that, my joking answer was the number of Zoom calls I have caused to happen that I don't have to be on. Finding the people who are the doers that will trigger, and sort of keeping track of that, because we have sort of the people go, well, maybe I'll get to it, and then they go out and kick ass, and then the people say, oh, I'm going to do it, and then crickets. So sort of keep getting kind of a map really of, who are the people who are stepping up and doing more connecting and getting resources to people has been kind of interesting, because one thing I keep finding, at least here in Idaho, is we have some amazing hidden gems. They're people nobody really knows much about, but are doing incredible things. The flip side of it are the very important people who seem still, even in the crisis, seem more interested in who gets the credit. But I think that this notion of sort of just, tracking what we're doing, it's like writing, instead of billable hours, oh, wouldn't that be nice if we could get billable hours for this? I think that's pretty amazing. But I'll bet Alistair has a better answer than I do. No pressure.
Yeah, I wouldn't count on it. But, well, I think I have to go back to what I said before, that as businesses rethink, and particularly those that have been devastated, then there will be new opportunities for supportive ecosystems that can assist those businesses either in changing their business model. Maybe they'll go more to online sales, for example, or that they're able to tweak what they do, partially revert to previous way of doing things and partially new. I mean, restaurants have been so hit so badly, and a lot of those are scrambling now to make delivery easier or going there, but it's still a developing model. So, just as a top of my head example, I haven't really thought it through. Restaurants may look to the next time there's some crisis and look at changing the way they do business in their model and in their actions. For example, to make it much easier. I know restaurants people to go there and dine in, but maybe they can expand their dining out activities, particularly in terms of making it more simple.
Now, in Boise, one of the posh restaurants, you can get a deluxe martini to go and get to keep the glass, and they're selling it for $1 less than they would have sold it if you were sitting at their bar, which I'm dying to get one just so I can figure out how the hell do you pack a martini because they're usually filled to the brim. The cleverness that's happening out there is people are doing some amazing things, and the more that we can share those stories, I'm jazzed.
Hey, Norris, I'd like to build on what you said and what Alistair said also, and that is, I wish we had a measure of, and some people have talked about this, the amount of volunteer hours. So if we could measure bandwidth somehow, how much time spent or engaged, and the other measure based on network theory is how many additional nodes we add as a builder, or maybe strengthen from a weak to a strong tie or something, if we could do something like that.
There's some great stuff out there, and it looks like Papa is nodding her head like she's just volunteering.
Well, I actually just talked to the other day. Do you guys know Scott Dempworth's work?
Yes, I do.
Okay, cool. He's an academic out of University of Maryland, and he studies a lot of network theory as it relates to economic development and innovation ecosystem theory. And we were having a really good conversation about how, like, what he's been able to do, at least in the innovation in the sense of like SBIR and university technology transfer is he's been able to use predictive analytics for like, what do certain networks look like in terms of their ties and their nodes? And can you use that to predict the economic gain that certain innovation clusters might see in terms of what jobs will be created and how much, money will get flowing through there? And he was actually able to devise some really interesting predictive analytics. And he was saying that the bulk of it was based off of the strength of ties. And the challenge we were talking about is that's a really easy thing to discern when you're looking at federally published data between collaborations for institutions for federal grant programs, but it's a lot harder to determine for informal innovation ecosystems. So like, how do you quantify the strength of a relationship between two ESOs? And so we had a really good conversation about how one might develop a Likert scale or something of that matter to quantify the bond between different players in an ecosystem. So we didn't really come up with a full data paradigm yet, but it was an interesting conversation that I had recently.
Well, Scott is very skilled at mapping this kind of data. He did it, at least in the last administration, did a lot of work for Department of Commerce on that. And I don't know if he's still doing that, but he's really very, very skilled. Just a comment about ties or links, both terms are used, is that there are possible ways you can measure these. But really what's important to keep in mind that a strong tie is not necessarily a good tie, and a weak one is not necessarily a bad one, because weak ones can be much more effective than strong ones. So in terms of measuring, you can think of ways to measure the strengths, but at the same time, you need to think about what that means. So what does this particular strongly, if you and I are strongly linked, what does that mean? And if you and I are weakly linked, what does that mean? And be very careful not to make assumptions about strong and weak.
Yeah, I really like this. There's just so much potential, because 20 years ago, God couldn't do the math to really do great social network analysis, and now it's become pretty trivial. I put in the chat that there's a duo at North Carolina who've been doing a lot of sort of social network mapping. And one of the things that they've been looking at is that there's a notion called structural holes, which is kind of a weird term, but there are problems in the network where there's only one person and one gatekeeper to a valuable resource. And that's a very different kind of connector than people like on this call who are very multilateral, very unselfish, shall we say, whereas gatekeepers have a vested interest in perhaps controlling access to that resource. The classic case was, you remember a little company called Groupon? Well, at their very peak, they're in Chicago, they wanted to meet with the mayor, and the mayor couldn't figure out why Groupon never called, because Groupon failed to talk to the right mayor's aide who was in charge of access. That sounds crazy, but apparently that's a very real phenomenon. But one of the things you can do without all the fancy math is say, okay, who are the people who are really connecting? Who are the unselfish connectors? Who are connecting the connectors? And who are the people who are guarding resources? And there's a third, and I think they call it pulse taker, that they're people who are intimately engaged in the ecosystem, but all they do is sort of watch. And again, they often turn out to be less than helpful. But how can we in Goal 5 help move all that forward?
Sure. One of the things that I want to throw in there, Norris, and you and I have had numerous conversations about, and I'm not a fan of who we call community czars and ecosystem builders, and I keep threatening to write a blog post about it, and every time I go to sit down to do it, I have to wonder to myself also is who am I to judge? and then try to give them the space and the grace to know that they don't know what they don't know, and they're modeling behavior. And what we have to do is show them better behavior. So, and I do want to call people out and go, you know what, this, not so good. But at the same time, there is a system that's been going on for a really long time. And the blog post I'm currently writing talks about the systems aren't broken. The systems are working for the people who the systems were built to work for. So as Eric was pointing out about inclusivity, and we had big conversation about the digital divide and thinking about how to connect with rural ecosystem builders and a couple of people that work in rural communities, talking about the fact that they, remember that you can actually use this thing to make a phone call, right? So
wait, you can use this as a phone?
I can, and I can text you and I can call you, Norris. I've got your number. But I think that that one of the things that we want to talk about shining a light on is who does it well, right? What does good look like? Do good well is something we say around Startup Champions all the time. And what is it that looks like, and how do we elevate that so that that becomes the pillar, and not those people are doing this, because some people can view the brokerage that's happening and look at that as power, right? Oh, all those people are so well connected because they have connections with all these people. And then you go, yes, but they're selfish and self-centered and all of the things that we complain about. So just to put out there that yes, it's a lot about people and their behaviors, and trying to recognize where how do we do good, and how do we elevate that good so that we can model that. Michael. Oh, I can't hear you. I see you're unmuted.
That's me, Cecilia.
Oh, yeah, okay.
Hey, could you expand a little bit on maybe the dependent variable here for us? What is it that we want? What are we trying to do? Is it a cultural shift? Is it a activity increase? Because you said good. What does good mean?
I think it's relative, right? And it depends on where we sit. And so for me personally, I under, one of the things that I've tried to do is take my cultural competency hat and put it on and go, okay, so we have to look at it from the lens that we come from, and what does good behavior look like in our society, and does that translate to what good behavior looks like in another society, right? So the answer to your question, what does good look like, I don't know, which is probably my hang up of not writing that blog piece that I really want to write about what does crappy ecosystem building look like, because again, who am I to judge, and at which lens am I looking out of when I say that? I can try to raise up good behavior, the ones that I reckon, what I see as good behavior, that's what I can shed a light on. But at the same time, and I can probably explain that a lot better as I'm talking about the people who I watch exhibit good behavior. Like, I will tell you, somebody on this call in their community, I've been invited into their community, and they were very mindful about convening a very diverse group of people. In this instance, it was women in the ecosystem, and they brought people together, and then they kind of introduced and then sat in the room and didn't say anything else, right? Which to me is a less egocentric behavior. It's not about being a community czar. You're not the power broker because you didn't do all the talking. So I can raise that up and say, that's a very mindful person in the way that they convened and didn't have to be the center of attention. Does that make sense, Michael? but I'll still write that piece one of these
Yeah.
days, right, Norris?
Well, I think you should. Is that this on Victor Wong's sort of test drive for the new right to start us up now. A lot of the comments that were flying, and certainly in the chat, was that it ultimately who's getting funded. There's never enough money for everyone, and the people who have money never feel like they have enough, and they are not going to yield their funding very easily, even whatever their behavior. We might say that yes, these are the definitely ecosystem builders, but they're getting the money, and they're going to continue to get the money until maybe it's the cultural. Mike said about the cultural shift, that figuring out how, at the end of the day, how do people in ESHIP Nation get adequately, even remotely adequately funded to move forward. And it means changing the narrative, changing the conversation. And, that, we're not operating in a vacuum but I like the idea, I've always liked the ideas of hidden gems, because there are always people, all the way back to, that video I mentioned, there are people doing amazing things that if we can shine a bright light on, I think that's marvelous. The unsung heroes thing that the storytelling people have done, the more we can accentuate the positive, I think, that may be certainly a politically stronger route than using automatic weapons on the bad guys. So I'm talking too much. Pava, did you have something you look to be looking thoughtful?
No, just really enjoying listening in. I look a lot at gatekeeping. And so I threw in the chat because someone had mentioned like ecosystem building before. And so Baltimore is a tiny city. And so we have a really good data on like who the ESOs are. So we're doing again, not at all scientifically sound study, just a very informal. We're looking at different ESOs and the degrees to which they share information about new resources, like new funding programs, whether those are for entrepreneurs or for ecosystem builders, and how much they share those, publicly, like through public channels accessible by anyone on social media, how much they share those internally, like in their newsletters or to people who are members of their organizations, and then how much they share it only through informal networks by like telling other people directly, to try to come up with some type of measure of how willing these organizations are to share information with others that would benefit the entire ecosystem, compared to how much they're kind of keeping that information to themselves and their constituents. It's really early based on our measures, and we kind of put it on pause to deal with the demand from COVID, but I'm happy to share the results of that in like 6 months when we get any sense of trends from that data, if there are any.
Thank you for doing that. That's pretty exciting. It's in the chat if you haven't seen that. Chad has joined us from Brisbane, and he said something very un-Norris-like, i.e. concise. Could you expand on your 6 words?
Yeah, sure thing, Norris. And hello, everyone. And it goes to one of the points that Cecilia was making, because every community applies their things differently. It's just so diverse. People are different personalities, a different background, culture, structures, but there are common principles that we can all follow. And sometimes we misappropriate, I think, principles for different contexts, like say give first, which then Cecilia and I have had the conversation how it infers kind of a capacity to do that in the first place, a bit of entitlement. But I think there are core principles. There's a bit of work that's been done around this. There are things around diversity and redundancy of resources, of leadership styles. It does in that promotional aspect, but also humility and practically what does that look like? The need to always add value and who you add value for, and considering all aspects of the community and social justice components. So I think there's a checklist of principles to put in place, because principles are then how we make decisions, rather than values, which is kind of an end result, and it's very difficult to do a value per se. But I can have a principle by which I make a decision on how I engage my community. So I have a principle around, for example, inclusivity and making sure all voices are heard, then how does that affect my decision making on the principle, on the policies and the practices and the procurement processes and all those kind of things. So I think a lot of our work we need to do is to say, how does the data inform the principles, and then how generalizable, that word, is it to then apply it to Baltimore or Brisbane or Bangladesh or any other place starting with B.
And the rest of the places. For anybody who would like to help work on some of those principles, there is a goal 3 call, shared vision, and I think that it's turned into more of a working call to really try to flesh out some of the principles. And the goal is to have a first pancake, released a draft by the ESHIP summit, whenever that will be. We're still planning on some experience for the ESHIP summit. So for those of you who haven't heard, it is being postponed till later in the year. We're looking at some dates and what form it will take depending on where we are in the world, depending on the dates. So so that's to be worked on, but goal 3 has a call and they're working on mission, vision, things like that. So for anybody who's interested, and I feel like Michael was going to say something before I jumped in.
No, I was just going to sort of run with Chad's comments. Chad, are you speaking about principles as founded in ethics or morality or first principles? Or I'm curious, because to Cecilia's previous point, in my ecosystem, I wouldn't mind somebody taking all the credit and not being humble if that lifted people out of poverty and fixed the drug problem. It wouldn't matter to me. So I'm just curious as to when you say principles.
Yeah, it's a great question, Michael. And it's one of the things that we have to acknowledge is that even the concept of ecosystem building and entrepreneurship overall is very, very normative, meaning we inflict ecosystems on regions thinking this is a good thing. You may go to a region, you're like, mate, you got like one major corporation. It's doing all the entrepreneurship you can want. You know, probably now isn't the time to have this conversation. But, you know, in some regions may need that raw person standing up. So it's not necessarily a matter of taking credit, because you need the advocacy, you need the outcome by which that charisma is going to put in place, but you don't need there are certain core principles, I think, such as arrogance, such as overt competitiveness with a focus on self. How do we break down the core components? You know, you can have somebody who's very competitive, but they're after the better know themselves and wanting to get forward, as compared to the negative side of it, of I have to beat you, and it's diminishing you and myself rising up over you. So it's defining the principles in a way that is universal, that speaks to the core of that it's something, for example, that religion attempts to do as well. How do we get to the core aspect that is the betterment of all? It's not easy. There's about 7 or 8 of them, I think, that we can settle on. It's what Victor tried to do with the rules of the rainforest. I think those kind of things are a good start, and it's sense checking those. Occasionally, again, we misappropriate, much like we do with religion. We find one little bit, and then we say, give first. And so therefore, we have all these unsustainable people burning out after 18 months because they're giving first. So I think as researchers, as data people, we say, okay, how does the data help inform the core of the principles? And then this constant reinforcing, making it more simple, which is something I'm challenged to do as I head into 5 minutes of trying to explain, what we mean by principles. So I think we do need them short, sharp, simple, 7 to 10 that are really generalizable, with a deep body of research on social science and psychology and economics that then go into what we mean by these 5 words. I think that's a body of work, which I think is going to take a whole bunch of people in a long time to keep sense checking these in multiple ecosystems to find out how they work in different contexts. Just one opinion, loosely held and open to discussion.
Thanks. I'm just, as I watch things evolve, for example, I'm from Silicon Valley, and California passed just recently that law AB 5 to get change gig economists, and my literally thousands of my entrepreneurs in California are deluging me with it's just destroying their businesses. And so we want to do good, but how do we understand this system? So those principles are important.
Yeah, and like we're seeing the same thing in Australia, obviously with a lot of the combination of COVID and the policies and who gets what, and a bit of a land grab. And sometimes some of us look back and say, well, actually that business kind of needs to close. And you know, there's a whole concept around suffering, and sometimes, like, you know, my business went bankrupt back in, you know, turn of the century following 9/11, and very similar kind of supply chain impacts. I think that was kind of necessary because it stress tested something that just couldn't withstand, and we would have been down in 5 years anyways. You know, how do we have that conversation in this current context? It's a challenge, but I think it's also part of our role. But yeah, it's a good point, Michael.
You know, I would add to that. Go ahead.
Oh, anyone else want to chime in? Everyone's like, I'm seeing a lot of nodding heads. I'm not seeing any of these, but well, Eric and Chad and I had, when we had hammered away on the agenda, one of the things that time to get busy, that what are the possible projects that we might, you know, what do we have canvases on, you know, whether the canvas is the right, you know, it's not the end all be all, but we've got some projects that have been put on the table, all of which have at least minimal traction and all seem pretty fundable. And I've heard at least 2 more projects that we could add to it. Certainly what Pava is doing, we could down the road could certainly build on that, take that national if she was were so inclined. So we've got actually 5 canvases out there. We're incurring the wrath of the other goals because we have more than them. But goal 4 has 2 canvases, both are fully running. So we, you know, sort of, it might be nice to catch up to them. So under Alistair was the first one to get a canvas in for Amy. Could you give us a couple minutes on what it is and what do you need to get going? If there's one thing that would get this thing accelerating, what would that be?
Well, this is a canvas about using a number of principles of complex systems regarding an ecosystem as a complex system with all its strong ties and weak ties and everything else in there. And I think what's really needed to get going on this is people that would be willing to answer some questionnaires about their ecosystem. So I can collect data and in this case fit it to the theory. Now, in many cases, it's not good to start with the theory and then data to get fitted, but this case, we didn't really have much of a choice. And as we collect data to fit it, to see if these principles of complex systems make sense for ecosystems, then be willing to drop any of those that don't apply. If the data shows that some part of this theory doesn't appear to be working, then we drop it. So I think really to get started is people who will be willing, and especially in these hard times, to address a short questionnaire and then, you know, maybe a phone call or 2.
So can I ask a question, because this comes up very often, the idea of survey taking to answer these tools, and I know that it's been the go-to for people to collect information. It has been probably one of the biggest pain points of trying to collect information is that you don't get enough of a subset of people to respond. It's not usually a diverse subset of people that respond. I mean, census be damned. It's, you know, it's all of those things. Somebody had asked, and Michael reminded me of a friend of mine who asked about the ability to gamify some situational things to see how people would behave as opposed to how they would answer. So that if there was a way to work in collaboration with people who create games, and put a person in a situation and see and try to collect data that way, that it might be a more open and a different way to gain information. I just wanted to put that out there and you're all the data experts. I'm a person who sits on the metrics team at Startup Champions, but you know, the reason that I joined the metrics team is because there's a want and a need for me to understand some of the data and how we collect it and what we can do differently in order to make it more robust.
Well, I would agree that a game is one way, and it can be an effective way. However, to develop a game, well, is a lot of work, a huge amount of work, and you know, whatever you think it's going to be, it takes more work. So to get things started, I think some sort of a survey. Now, I've done a lot of surveys, mostly when I've been a consultant to the World Bank, and so I think I have some experience there and can see maybe when it's going right, going wrong. A game would be terrific, though. I mean, that would be just wonderful, but it's a huge amount of work and a huge amount of time. But if we get there eventually, yes, we should.
Yeah, Alistair, and then maybe Michael's work is that you can do. There's a scenario approach instead of saying, you know, give us a short answer to this question or a Likert scale or multiple choice. Here's a scenario. How would you act? Or here are two different scenarios. Which would you prefer? If it's done cleverly and properly tested, you know, it's sort of a mini gamification, but it yields insights that are much closer to or more valid than, you know, asking them a multiple choice question. That we use some of that, a mix of that in the EPIC project. We're creating an assessment tool for outcomes on entrepreneurship education, and our first scenarios really sucked, but by the time they got done, they were very, you know, they're very powerful. So there are ways we can do that. Michael or Chad, have any of you used scenario items?
Hey, I'd like to add on to what Alistair said, Chad, if you don't mind. I'm an engineer geek, so I will second what he said. These things are so expensive to do game stuff and so problematic. I would argue, Alistair, that really what you're doing is hypothesis testing. So I think you're on the right path, and I think surveys are the way to go. And to Chad's earlier point, I think that one of the things I found in at least my ecosystem is mindset shift, because the new mindset that we all live in is hypothesis testing. And so Chad tested his out and he failed and he learned from it. But most of the people in my ecosystem are still in the old model. So we'll do whatever it takes to not fail. So I think surveys are great, and I would support that and help in any way that I can. To Norris's point, conjoint analysis would be great here to sort of link in on exactly what people would do with behavior-wise.
Yes, and some of the questions I've already worked on are kind of mini scenarios, rather simple ones. And certainly when I say questions, I don't mean, you know, what do you want? What do you need kinds of questions, not those. Pose it completely differently. And in the form of a, you know, in our ecosystems, we do such and such, and to get a response to that. So it's going to be carefully thought through. And as they say on surveys, I would strongly agree with the idea of scenarios of one kind or another, either the more complicated ones that Shale, for example, is experts at, or some very simple ones.
Well, conjoining can be remarkably simple. There's discrete choice analysis, which is another, was one form of the scenario analysis. You give people a set of conditions, and choosing between them can elicit some pretty rich results. I love Pava's idea. Have you all read what Pava just posted in the chat? If not, just when Pava, could you just repeat that?
Yeah, so we found like one of the ways we encourage people to give us full information is instead of sending them a blank survey, we scrape what information that we can online about their programs, what we know, and then we send them that half-completed survey. And we always find across the board that they are so much more willing to fill it out in full if we've done half the work than they ever are to fill it out if we just hand them a blank piece of paper. I think it's just very much a human impulse thing, like, oh no, I need to make sure that that is right, rather than oh, I'm gonna give my time to fill out this informative information. There's also probably like a part of it, we put this on a publicly searchable database, so there's that element of it, but I think it's a lot of a human impulse to just finish what is already there.
Yeah, that's
I'll agree with,
great comment. Thanks. Sorry, Chad.
No, that's all good, Alistair. Yeah, and 2 points on that one. One of them, absolutely, because that's one thing we found with startup status is when you send the surveys out from the system and it's already pre-populated with their data. So many times you get a survey from an organization we've known for like 3 years, and you're like, mate, why are you asking me by name? Like, do you know me? So pre-populating is good. And the second one is, even if it's not like an automated dashboard type thing like Genome might have or something, if we can, as immediately as possible, turn the results around, give them that immediate feedback. We talk about games as all encompassing, but break down the components of it. One of the things that makes a game is that I kill someone, I see my score go up, or I hop that bridge, I see points come on my experience. And so if we can find a way to say, you answered this, here's where you sit with everybody else, here's what it means, here's your dashboard type thing, even if it's like a day or two after, a more rapid processing of the results, if we can at all possible. Deal Room, a couple of other platforms are really good at that. If we can kind of replicate that in a very manual concierge approach, might be good.
Yeah, it is getting students to fill out a survey, let's say on the entrepreneurial mindset or entrepreneurial skills, and even if it's required for the course, they're not too excited about it unless you tell them, oh, as soon as as soon as we get the results, you'll get your score and see how you stand up in the class. And I mean, it was like literally watching them put their heads down and immediately start filling out the survey. You remind me, that's can be pretty awesome. Anybody else want to chime in? We're kind of, Beth, you're being very, very quiet.
Beth is also invisible today, so.
I don't know, maybe, the zombies have attacked Erie, Pennsylvania.
So I know that you've got a couple of
hour, guys, so sorry about that. But I just some great conversation here.
I think that actually that was what I was going to say. It's a very rich conversation, and I know that you want to talk about the rest of the projects. Beth, did you want to go ahead?
I just want to say I am here and listening to this really great conversation. That's it. I'm alive.
All right, so we don't have to worry about Beth and the zombies. So I want to be mindful of people's time, but I don't want to, I mean, I think that this has been such great wealth of information and exchange. So I don't know how you want to, there's a couple of other projects that you want to talk about, or do you want to have them maybe look at the projects on the dashboard and then chime in on Slack, or how would you like to follow up on that, and maybe some topics to talk about aside from this call? I mean, the Slack channel is open to you. How would you like to proceed?
Well, there's been some, I'm looking at a page page full of notes here that there is some really important stuff that it would be great if we could all reflect on and share further thoughts, whether it's on the Goal 5 Slack channel, or I think that'd probably be the best vehicle. If you're not on the Goal 5 Slack channel, contact Celia, she'll get you hooked up. And I think that's sort of exciting. One of the projects is there is a actually what maybe the oldest oldest project on Goal 5 was to build a survey platform and figuring out how to incentivize people to actually to fill it out, and that's the big question to wrestle with. But that's under, well, it was used to be Goal 5.5, but it's now probably part of Goal 5.1, but it's one of the canvases that I think, but there's a couple things here I really want to, I have a blog post in mind now, the Great Rethink, courtesy of Alistair. I would really love to hear from all of you, your later, if not now, then later, your reflections on, what was your biggest takeaway from this conversation? Yes, go do the survey, look at the canvases online, but right now, what's sort of your immediate, what was your number one takeaway? Alexander, what is your number one takeaway from this? She always has cooler glasses than me, damn it.
Yeah, following you. It's always for me very interesting, since it's a totally different perspective, I guess, from the others, because here the ecosystem is totally differently kind of arising at this point, and I'm looking for like kind of the thing with the principles would be my takeout, which were mentioned. I was considering whether those principles would be applied also for this region, or could be applied for this region. For this, that would be my question, like my thought now for the time being. A lot of interesting things were mentioned, a lot of interesting ideas, and which bring me kind of in a confusion how to approach our ecosystems especially in the region on the Balkans, since the main ecosystem builders are now evolving around the startup success of some entrepreneurs. So I'm kind of coping to what everybody was saying, but still I'm considering that we are much further away than other more developed, let's say, surroundings or ecosystems. So that's my main question, my main confusion is how kind of to find a way how to help this existing ecosystem, which is pretty weak at this point, in order to bring it up with new ideas from everybody else. So apart from, of course, measuring, because we don't have, we are very big data here. This is also a problem, which is one of my concerns. So literally a few hours that were mentioned from everybody involved, but I can because I was not falling into this conversation, unfortunately.
Thanks, Alexandra. You're kind of breaking up. The Zoom gods are capricious again. Probably knows that Zoom knows we're over time. But thank you for joining it. The Balkans is should be a fascinating test bed. You've got so many really good people there, like you and other folks in Croatia and Slovenia and even Kosovo, that but it's a very different situation than we have here, and we should be mindful of that. Pava, what is your takeaway?
I mean, I'm just really happy that I get to nerd out on entrepreneurial ecosystem data with someone, because I don't get to do that very often. So really just appreciative that you guys let this be so open and like allowed me to join. And I'm really looking forward to getting more involved as I figure out what all of the efforts are, and like happy to help however possible.
Well, you are welcome. You've already, more than, earned your way. And besides, if we weren't open to you, Celia would send a drone strike to my house. But thank you and I hope you'll come more often. Michael, what did you take away?
Hey, Norris. Hey, everyone. I don't know, just more fuel for the fire is all. I'm add more confusion, and which is good because I know the light is at the end of the tunnel. So I appreciate it from everyone.
And it's probably not an oncoming train. Alistair?
I'm interested in the principles, so I'm a little confused, and my takeaway is that I've got to think more about this conversation we've had about principles.
And Chad? Eric claims he has no comments, but we're going to make him go last then. Chad?
It's okay. Thanks, Norris. It's always good to be catching up, and appreciated Michael's perspective from San Francisco as far as practically what does it mean for entrepreneurs coming through in a crisis and how the principles apply there. Good to hear from Pava's perspective just on the surveys and pre-population, which is good. And even the last point from Alexandria with regards to how do we adapt ecosystem measurement across the different life cycles of an ecosystem from just emerging to mature and developed, and how does it adapt? So yeah, good conversations. Well done.
And I'll go super surfacey, not too deep on this. It just bears reminding. I like the best practices around just, trying to lean forward in terms of letting people know that you already know who they are and giving them some kind of feedback relatively quickly, especially in the world today where they're being poked and prodded and have much deeper concerns than answering other people's questions. So I think it's important. So thank you very much. I always appreciate the great voices we're able to bring into this call. Thanks to the new folks as well.
Well, my takeaway is there's an old saying, never be the smartest guy in the room. And I love these calls because I always can live up to that principle. Like Pava, I get to nerd out a little bit, but we also get to get a little deep and be, as the kids would say, get real. And I appreciate that. But I will be bugging you shortly on other things. I wish you had more people on the call, but on the other hand, we wouldn't have had the depth of discussion. So I think principles more than prescriptions. What are those principles? How can we make them less situational? The pre-populated surveys and quick feedback. Again, I echo that. And I'm still got Alistair's thing, the great rethink that many firms are going through. It also got that stuck in my head. Do you check your email? Take your time, but look through the different canvases and see where you might be able to help or come up with a better one. And we've got a survey that you can just let us know what you think of the format, because Chad and I argued about it, and I think I'm starting to think he might actually been right. So anyway, if I can ever do anything to help any of you on the ground where you are, you know how to find me, and I should let you guys get on with your day.
Hey, Norris.
Papa, go do some math.
Oh, I will.
Michael,
right.
Did you?
Yeah, Norris, can I make one more comment? Are we still on?
Yes.
Alistair, I'm in the middle of doing literally thousands of interviews around the ecosystem, and clearly the vast majority of those do not provide a lot of validity or deep understanding. So I like your survey idea, and maybe Cecilia and the rest of us on the call can hook us up with experts in the field so that your surveys just provide you more really good stuff than quantitative power. Does that make sense?
That would be wonderful. Yes. So maybe we can talk some more about it on the Slack channel.
Yeah, that'd be great.
Guys.
And Delphi is good for that too.
Yeah. So anything else, or can we go look at that John Krasinski some good news video, number 2. You will love it. And I will see you all next month. If not,
Thanks,
sooner.
everyone.
Yes.
Take care,
You
everyone.
guys
Have a
are
good one.
awesome.
Thank you, everyone.